Alright, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to create the player inventory window that will be able to toggle either show or hide it from the screen by pressing the I or tab key on our keyboard. So let's go ahead and get started. So the very first thing that we want to do is in our main folder, we want to open up our widgets, right click, add a new folder for textures. So textures/icons, this is where we're going to store all of our images, backgrounds, icons, all the stuff we're going to be using for our widgets. So now you want to go to the lecture notes and go ahead and download the files for this lecture. So it'll be this little textures.zip. So just right click and extract all. And that will extract the contents of the folder. So you'll have this inventory background.tga and player stats background. So just select these files and drag and drop it into that textures folder, and they should import just like that. Okay, so now that we have those backgrounds imported, we can go in our widgets here and we want to create a new folder and name this inventory widgets. Okay, so all of the inventory widgets that we create will be stored inside of here. And so instead of creating our inventory widget inside of here, what we're going to do is make a separate widget that will store all of the inventory, the player window, all that stuff inside of it. And you're going to see this a lot throughout this course, creating different widgets and using them inside of other widgets. So inside of the inventory widgets, we're going to right click and create a new user interface widget blueprint. And of the type just widget blueprint. We want to name this to w_inventory. So go ahead and open this up here. And for our inventory widget, it's going to have quite a bit of stuff to allow for the proper formatting of the different windows. So you'll see what I mean here in a second, but what we're going to first add to our inventory here is a size box. So go ahead and search for size box, select and drop it on our inventory here. So a size box, if you select it, you're going to see this allows us to specify specific width and height override. So it allows us to specify the exact dimensions of this window. So just click these little check marks on the width and height override. We want to set the width to 1650 and the height to 880. So these are pixels. So I have 1650 pixels by 880 pixels. So compile and save that. And now what we want to do is from our fill screen, we want to change this to desired on screen. So now it changed to the actual aspect ratio or resolution that we've set here in the height and width override. So inside of our size box, we're going to add a vertical box. And under our vertical box, we're going to add a couple of different things. So we're going to add a spacer. And then we're going to add a horizontal box in between the spacer. So you don't want to put it on the spacer. And in fact, you can't. So you want to put it inside of the vertical box. So we have the vertical box, and inside of that we have a spacer, a horizontal box. Then we want to add another spacer on the vertical box. So we have a spacer, horizontal box, and a spacer. Now select the horizontal box, and right now you can see it's all collapsed up here at the top. But we want to set this horizontal box to fill. Compile, save that, so it'll be filled in the center. And then all that these spacers do is they add some extra padding, okay? So I want to select the spacer here at the top, and in the appearance here, you can change the amount of space that will pad. So we want to set this to 80. So 80 there, and then select the bottom spacer, and we want to set the size on the Y to 90. So all that is doing is it's adding some space here at the top and here at the bottom to help us format our inventory window. Here in the center, we're going to add our player window. So this will have like a little preview of our character, which has, items equipped. It'll have like our armor slots. And down here on the bottom, it'll have like our stats. Then over here on the left, we're going to have our inventory window. So this will have, all the items in our inventory. Then over here on the right, it's going to have a storage box window. So if you open up a storage box, it will show all the items inside of it. So inside of this horizontal box, we're going to add vertical boxes. So search for a vertical box. Add a vertical box like so. And then add another vertical box inside of this horizontal box. And the last thing we want to add is a border inside of that horizontal box. And then with the first vertical box, we want to set this to fill. And the second vertical box, we can also set that to fill. And the border, we can set that to fill. So now what you're seeing here is we have the 3 different sections. So this is going to be our player inventory, our player window that has like the stats and little preview of our character, and then our storage box inventory. We want to add some padding on these. So if you select the vertical box here, we have this padding value. For this specific window, we have some custom padding, so click this drop down. For the left, we want to set this to 15 pixels. For the top, we want to set this to 20. For the right, we want to set this to 15, and the bottom to 20. So I've messed around with the padding, and you can too later on when we have all the widgets sort of set up so you can see what it looks like. But it basically just adds a little space around the windows. Okay, so select the next vertical box, the center one here. And for the padding, we're going to add 20 on the left and then 20 on the right. Okay. And for this last little window, this little border, we're just going to add 20 to the overall padding. So it's going to add 20 padding around the entire thing. So now, let's go ahead and add a border. So search for a border here and add it to this center vertical box. And select that border and set it to fill. And so borders are basically, you can set them to like images, but the difference with borders is that they can have a child. So what that means is I can put like a button or a vertical box or something like that onto this border. Whereas an image, it can't really have like children. You can't add a vertical box to an image. So that's why we're using borders here, and again, it will make a lot more sense as you get more and more familiar with widgets. With this border selected, in the appearance here, we can click this drop down for the brush. And so we have an image here, and so we want to set this to our widgets, textures. We have this player stats background, so that's this little player window. So with this selected, so if it's selected in blue like that, you can just hit this little arrow and it will automatically assign that image right here. So compile and save that. So this is the background for our player window. Then with this vertical box, what we want to add inside of here is we actually want to add a spacer inside this vertical box. And then we want to add a horizontal box inside of this vertical box right here, and then another spacer at the very bottom. So make sure we have inside of this vertical box a spacer, horizontal box, and spacer. So for the top spacer, we want to set the size here to 80. For the horizontal box, we want to set this to fill. And for the bottom spacer, we want to set the size here to 30. Compile, save that. So now we can add a border, so search for border, and add this inside of that horizontal box in the middle. And we want to set the border to fill. And then we can set the image of the border. So in our content browser, we can select this inventory background and set the image right here in the brush. So I know that might be a lot, adding all these different boxes and spacers, and all of that. But basically this allows us to very meticulously lay out our different windows in a way that it's formatted the way that we want it to. That's just how UI works, where you have to have, a box within a box within another box. And again, it will make a lot more sense as you get more familiar with how to design widgets. So now, in this border, we want to add a vertical box. So again, another box within a box. Basically, what we want inside of this is we want to have some text here and some buttons. So we want to have an inventory button right here and a crafting button. And so we'll toggle between our inventory tab and our crafting tab. And then down here, we're going to have another box. We're just going to have a scroll box that will show all of our inventory items. Okay, so we have our border, and then we have our vertical box, and then we want to add horizontal box inside of that vertical box, and in there we'll add a button. And so on the button we'll add some text. So search for text and drag the text onto this button. And then with the text selected here, we can name this to inventory. And then take this button and just Control-C, copy. So either right-click and do copy, or Control-C, and then paste it inside of this horizontal box. It'll add another button right next to it. And then just select the text on the second one here and change this to crafting. So now we need to select this button, the second button here, and set this to align on the very right and set this to fill. So compile and save that. So we have our inventory and our crafting buttons. And then down here is where we're going to add our actual inventory slots. Real quick, I'm also going to add some little text up here so that we know that this is the player window. So on this vertical box in the border, we're going to add another vertical box on that border, and inside of that vertical box we're going to add a horizontal box, and inside of that horizontal box we're going to add a text, and then just take that text and do fill. And with the text selected, you want to set the justification to be in the center, to align it in the center. Then we can change the text here to player name. Compile and save that. So now we have our very basic player name. And let's add a little bit of padding here. So if we expand this, we're just going to add 15 padding on the top, so it's kind of centered like that. And then for the style of these buttons, let's go ahead and just change this real quick. That way it looks a little bit nicer. First, let's upscale the text. So if you select the text here, we'll change the font size to 28. And same with the crafting, we'll change the font size to 28. And then we'll take these buttons, and what we'll do is you can change like the style, the color of the button. Right now we have sort of this grayish color. And what I'm going to do is under the style, if we expand this, we have a normal. Under the tint, we can select a color, so we can change the color of it. But instead of setting a color, I just want to make this invisible. So just set this alpha to 0. Okay. And then you unexpand this normal. And what you can do is you can just copy this and paste this over on this other style right here. You can also copy the entire style of the button and select this other button and right click and paste it right here, so it copies the entire style over. So now we should have something looking like this. Now this other storage window, we're just going to set the image on this. We're not really going to be messing around with this until a few chapters down the line, so we're actually going to hide this from our view for now. But let's just go ahead and set the image. So for the border here, if we have that selected, we can set this to the same sort of background that we have there. So we'll set this to our player stats background and just assign it like that. And then we don't actually want to see this, For now, we can just hide this, and there's two different ways that we can hide this. We can hit this little widget visibility that will make it hidden. But you see when we do that, it stretches these windows. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave it visible for now. But in the details, if you have this border selected, if we scroll all the way down, we have this visibility right here. And we're going to set this to hidden. So whenever we add this to our viewport, it's going to be hidden, but right now in the designer, we can still see it for now. Okay, so we've made our very simple player inventory widget. We want to really quickly add this to our main widget here, and then we want to let our player press the tab or I key to hide or show the inventory widget. So to add this inventory widget that we created to our main widget, all you have to do is under the palette in the user created, you can see we have this W inventory. So this is the same widget that we just created. So you can take this widget and just drag and drop it into your main HUD. And then you're going to see that it's scaled all the way down, so you can either scale it up or you can click this size to content. And the size to content will automatically size it to the size that we set in this size box, okay, to that 1650 by 880. So now that we've had it added in here, we want to anchor it to the center, because right now our anchor is set to the very top left. So select the anchor, and we want to anchor it in the center of our screen. And then to get it exactly dead in the center, what you can do is reset the position X and position Y. And then for the alignment, we can set this to 0.5 and 0.5. So that will automatically align this in the exact center of our screen. So compile and save that. So now we have this added. Technically, if we were to hit play, we should automatically see this on our screen. But like I said, I want to add that key on our keyboard that will toggle the visibility of the inventory widget on our screen. What we want to do is, by default, we want this window hidden. So when the player plays a game, we don't want our inventory open. So select this W inventory widget, and if you scroll down to the visibility, we want to set this to hidden, so that it is hidden by default. Then in our main widget, we want to go over to the graph, and we want to add a new custom event. So down here, right click, we want to add custom event. And all we want to do is we want to name this to set inventory vis, or set inventory visibility. And these custom events, they're kind of similar to functions in which you can add things like inputs. So we want to add an input of the type Boolean. I want to change the name to visibility question mark. And then what we can do is hook this up to a branch. And this will allow us to set the visibility, either visible or hidden, of our inventory window. So now we can select our inventory window. And the thing you're going to notice about widgets, like the text and this widget right here, this window, is actually a variable that we can use in the graph. So we can drag this W inventory and get it. And then off of this, we have the reference where we can do things like set the visibility of this window. So off of here, we can do a set visibility. And so off the true, we can set this to visible, and then copy and paste this. And off the false, we can set this to hidden. So if the checkbox is set to true, the inventory will be visible. If it's set to false, set it to hidden. So now we can call this event inside of our player controller. When we hit the I key, we can call this event to set it either to hidden or visible. So go in your main Blueprints survival game player controller and down here we can add a tab key, keyboard event tab. We can also add a I key. Now technically you could use like the E key or really any key that you want. And later on we're going to change these to inputs rather than just hard set keys. That way in the options menu you could change the bindings of those keys rather than having to only use these set keys. So now what we want to do is right click, add custom event, and we want to do a inventory on client. So name this to inventory on client. So we want to change this event from the replicates here to a run on owning client, because basically the user widget only exists on the client. So if you were to do this on the server, nothing is going to happen because there's no widget on the server. Okay, because the server is a dedicated server, there's no player that's playing as the server. So on our inventory on client, we can now call this event, so make sure you compile, save that. Off the press we can do our inventory on client and hook that up like so. And then down here we want to add a new variable. So in the variables, add a new variable. This will be a boolean. It'll be named inventory shown question mark. So we're going to check, so we're going to use a boolean to see whether or not our inventory is currently shown on our screen. That way we know whether to hide it or show it. So drag this and get this and hook this up to a branch. So we're going to check and see, is our inventory shown? If it is, we want to get our main widget reference. So this is a reference to our main widget here, which allows us to call this event that we have inside of our main widget. So now we can do our set inventory viz and hook this up to the true. And if it is true, we want to set this the visibility. So if our inventory is shown, we want to set this to hidden. So I want to set that to false and then copy and paste this. And if it is not shown, we want to set this to true, which means that we are setting this window to visible. Okay, so compile and save that. So now technically if we hit play, we should be able to see. If we press I, we have it on our screen. Press I again, it looks like it's not setting it because we haven't actually set the boolean. So let's go ahead and back in our controller, we aren't actually setting the inventory shown boolean. So right after this, what we want to do is get our inventory shown and set it and hook this up. Is our inventory shown? Nope. Copy and paste this down here. If our inventory is not shown, we want to set it to shown. So click that little checkbox there. Now we should be able to press the tab or I key and show or hide the widget. So we press tab or I, and you can see we can either show or hide our inventory. So one last thing before we wrap this lecture up is we can't actually see our mouse cursor. So we can't click on our inventory when we have like our items and stuff set up. We don't have our mouse cursor shown on the screen. So we want to add that in our player controller. So right here, what we want to do before this is right off of here we want to do a set input game only. And for our player controller, select off of here and do a get reference to self. So basically, if our inventory is visible, we want to set it, our input to game only. I'm also forgetting one more thing. We actually want to drag off here and add a set show mouse cursor. And this will actually set whether or not to show the mouse cursor. And this is a variable inside of the player controller. We actually don't have to create that variable. It is a default variable that comes built into this player controller class. So now down here we want to copy, paste this, and if our inventory is visible, we want to show our mouse cursor, and then we want to set our input mode. So set input mode. We want to set this to game and UI. So this will allow us to not only have input for our UI, so like click buttons and drag and drop items, but also still click keys on our keyboard. So for the player controller, we want to get reference to self. And now we should have our mouse cursor shown on the screen. So if we hit play here, we don't have a mouse cursor, we're controlling our character. If we press tab, we have a little mouse cursor that we can use to click and drag, and we'll add some drag and drop functionality later on, but we can click on our items, we can scroll through our inventory, and then we can press tab again. You can see we're back to our normal game input. So I know that was a lot for one lecture, but building all of the different UI elements, once we get it all done and out of the way, you really don't have to revisit this, other than if you want to change the styling and the way that the widgets look. But in our next lecture, what we're going to do is we're going to create the actual inventory slots. So we're going to create the item icon and widget that we're going to use to then add to our inventory window. So with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next lecture.